Moving on to audit. Last chapter. Okay, so writ large, we've talked about this concept of risk and using risk to target our oversight practices throughout the life cycle of the award. Pre-award, thinking about risk, terms and conditions, thinking about risk, oversight, thinking about risk, performance, thinking about risk. Now we come to the audit, and now's the opportunity again where we want to make sure that audit requirement is not just this blanket compliance check the box exercise that's kind of just covering everything and providing burden, but rather wanting to make sure it's really focused on those areas of high risk, providing that valuable information that we need about where those risks are, and then also that it's being used as a management tool throughout the federal awarding agency and for the recipient about how to strengthen those internal controls and improve transparency into the management of federal awards, again, throughout the life cycle. So, what are the revisions to the single audit? There are a few big ones. The first of all, we've increased the audit threshold. We've gone from $500,000 to $750,000. This means previously, if you expended $500,000 per year in federal funds, you're having a single audit. Now that threshold is $750,000. And this increase actually maintains single audit coverage over 99% of the dollars that were covered by single audits before, so you're not missing much, but it eliminates that requirement for about 5,000 entities. So shrinking that footprint just a little bit, again, to focus more on the areas of risk. Finally, strengthening the risk-based approach to determining major programs. So for this one, once the auditor goes in and they're thinking about which programs to audit, we want that decision to be much more targeted on the areas of programs where there have been real material weaknesses that have been developed, that have been identified in previous audits. So you're going to see that risk framework changing just a bit to focus much more in on the areas, programs that are higher risk. Provides greater transparency. All those audit reports are getting published online. They've always been public information under the Single Audit Act. They've been public since the 80s when they started getting done. However, it's been kind of hard to get them. Sometimes you need a Freedom of Information Act request to actually see those audit reports. So now those are all going to be published online at the Federal Audit Clearinghouse website. Auditees will be responsible prior to submission for making sure there's no personally identifiable or otherwise sensitive information included. That being said, they'll be published, they'll be sent to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and what that does is actually eliminate the paper chase also for pass-through entities trying to track down audit reports for subrecipients. You won't have to do any of that anymore because they'll just go to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, they'll be public, anyone can get them, federal awarding agencies, pass-through entities, they'll all be right there. So you eliminate that paper chase and you improve that transparency and oversight for public as well to understand where their taxpayer dollars are going. Finally, strengthening agency use of the single audit process. So requiring agencies to appoint a senior accountable official. This is someone in the agency leadership who's responsible for making sure we're not just doing this check the box compliance exercise, but we are getting our audits, we're resolving them appropriately, we're using those lessons learned, incorporating it as a management tool into how we manage our awards. A management liaison responsible for working across the federal government. So if you have cross-cutting findings that cut across more than one federal award, this will be the person who's responsible for working across the federal government to try to provide a more seamless and consistent response when you're working with federal agencies to resolve that. Single audit metrics are now in the guidance. These are the same that you'll see in M1417, our metrics for the guidance throughout the uniform guidance across. But these metrics are actually enshrined in the guidance. Agencies are required to measure. And the biggest one is number of repeat findings. So what we want to see here is that it's not just a check the box exercise, same findings year after year, but rather we're actually doing the corrective actions we need, working together to actually resolve those findings. And a big part of that is agencies are encouraged to use cooperative audit resolution mechanisms. So this means, again, rather than just check the box, issue the management decision letter, and be done, agencies actually get together, legal, program people, financial management, oversight, work proactively with the recipient on their corrective action plan, make sure that the recipient is actually addressing those internal control weaknesses, provide any technical assistance, maybe even forgive some of those question costs if the recipient is really making progress in good faith, and actually make sure those findings are resolved so that the next year they're going down. You don't see that same finding again and again, and ultimately the internal control and financial integrity of that program is being strengthened. And actually, just to give you an example, the Department of Labor used to have a really high number of administrative actions, complaints filed when they'd file their management. They'd send their management decision letters, and they'd get a lot of administrative action, arbitration, even legal costs. These would be contested. They'd have to go to court. They'd be appealed, etc. They implemented a cooperative audit resolution approach and had a 100% reduction in their post-management decision letter follow-up action. So while it requires a little bit more work up front, it can dramatically streamline the process on the backside and really strengthen the financial integrity of our awards. So there's a big push across the government for agencies to really be proactive here in how they use these reports to follow up. And then again, of course, to use these when you're looking at your risk assessments at the beginning of the award, you should be thinking, okay, we had this single audit, they've done this corrective action, they've really fixed all their problems, we have much more confidence, that's how we're going to structure the award going forward. And the final piece is looking at the compliance supplement. Single audit compliance supplement is this very large document that provides instructions to auditors about how to look at each particular program, and there are 14 types of compliance requirements auditors look at. And so OMB has been working with federal and non-federal stakeholders over the past year to try to streamline that compliance supplement down and actually streamline those requirements again to those areas most focused on risk of waste, fraud, and abuse. So hopefully what you'll see in the next few months is the 2015 compliance supplement gets updated every year. So every year hopefully it will be increasingly more efficient, but this year in particular, we're hoping to publish a more streamlined compliance supplement. So what hasn't changed? The single audit, basic structure of the single audit process has not changed. You have the threshold. Now, again, the threshold itself has changed, but you have the threshold. You have your same subrecipient versus contractor determinations. You have some exceptions for biennial and program-specific audits. Non-federal entities still responsible for selecting the auditor, preparing financial statements, preparing their scheduled expenditure of federal awards. Major programs are determined based on risk. Audit follow-up and corrective action, still the recipient of the auditee and federal awarding agency working with them to resolve the finding. Audit reports are due 9 months after the end of the fiscal year. Reports go to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and the compliance supplement, again, while streamlined, is still in basically the same overall format. So same basic structure of the audit that you're used to, again, just hopefully streamlined to be dramatically more useful and a better management tool going forward. Let me pause there. Any questions about single audit? Yeah. Okay.
So all of this data goes to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse with the CIVA. This is specific to the CIVA. In our monitoring, we check the CIVA to ensure that they are recording our awards appropriately on there. And we find instances all the time that they're not. I can imagine our world of 300 contracts and 100 contractors, we see a percentage. If you brought that, so how confident are you that this data that goes to the clearinghouse is accurate? And what do they do with the data after? I mean, it's not like you're saying, here's the billions of dollars that we're spending, and you're using that to say, here, how it's spent. It's not always accurate.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a question about the accuracy of the information in the CIVA. If you're seeing inaccurate information, that's where you should be following up. And it's, yeah, well, great.
We say it's not.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the responsibilities of the pass-through entity and the responsibilities of pass-through entities. And I think actually making these reports public online will probably help strengthen that, because you're going to have all that many more eyes on it saying, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Let's make sure it's accurate. And I think what's really most important about these reforms is kind of closing the loop on the audit report. Because previously, you have these audit reports that are these great resources of information about financial integrity in federal awards, who's getting the awards, how they're managing them, what the challenges are. And they're going to the audit resolution shops, fine, getting resolved, but that's kind of it. And so now what you have is this focus on closing that loop and having these audit reports actually much more embedded in program decisions up front at the beginning of the award as well. So it matters what's in your single audit report. It's always mattered, but now it matters even more because in addition to just having to resolve those findings for themselves, that information is going to be public, so that's going to be kind of your reputation on the line about how you're managing federal awards. And also, it becomes much more of a management tool as agencies are assessing the risk associated with an award the next time they make one. So there are real consequences there in terms of what your terms and conditions of your award is going to look like based on your single audit report.
I guess that was sort of one of my things too, is how does it get, whose responsibility is to get on there? Because in some cases, based on some risk management issues that we have, we don't release payment until we get the single audit report, the final payment. And so that's, usually I think it comes faster from the agency when they get that rather than waiting for I didn't know if it would be months later or beyond the clearinghouse or.
Yeah, it's a good question about timing in terms of how fast they'll publish it. I don't know, but I think it will be very quick once they receive it. So there's still that 9-month due date for the recipient to submit the audit report. But the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, I think it will be published very quickly because it's not, the Federal Audit Clearinghouse is not doing anything to it. They're just going ahead and making it public, and it's the non-federal entity's responsibility to submit what they know is going to be a public document. So yeah, it should be very quick. Any other audit questions? So it applied. Yeah, the audit requirements kick in for the fiscal year that starts after December 26, 2014. So for audits of fiscal years beginning after December 26, 2014. So if your fiscal year starts in July, the fiscal year that starts this July 2015 and ends next July 2016, when you go to audit that fiscal year, you'll be at the new threshold potentially. That audit report will be public. You'll have that new guidance about the audit will kick in then.